Hello friends, my name's Real Emile and welcome back to Forza Motorsport 5. Today we're continuing on with the Top Gear laps, and today's subject is beating the McLaren MP4-12C. Now around our track this is one of the fastest supercars we've had. It currently sits in 6th with a 1 minute 17.240. The only car that's managed to get marginally close to that recently is the Celine S7, and that's a full-on hypercar. So I was wondering if any of its rivals could beat the McLaren MP4-12C. It doesn't really have much of a reason to be up there either. I mean, it's a fairly okay-ish handling supercar. There's nothing that majorly sets it apart from its rivals like the Ferrari 458. But yet, it's managed to go 2.5 seconds quicker. And it's even the same around the real-life Top Gear track. This is one of the quickest cars around there, and again, other than it being developed to the Top Gear track, there's no real reason for this. So I figured we'd throw 6 cars around and see what they can do. For the first car today is the Nissan GT-R Black Edition. This has 542 horsepower, it has 4-wheel drive, and it's about the same class as the McLaren, so I was curious. Now the GT-R, it was okay to drive around here. There's quite a bit of understeer in the GT-R, which is not what I was expecting. Through the first corner though, it managed to stay relatively tame. Second corner, again, pretty much the same. There's a bit of understeer going in, but the good news of getting understeer into the second corner is you can stick a lot of power on the way out. So I'm not quite sure how many seconds you'd lose through there by understeering, but I can't imagine it'd be too much. The 4-wheel drive system was quite nice around here. You could definitely boot it out of all the corners, and doesn't really have a problem with that. Yeah, it was pretty alright, the GT-R. Not quite as planted as I was expecting it to be, but yeah, overall fairly decent. Through the follow-through, you do have to take it a little bit slow, because otherwise it'll understeer wide. Through the tyres, again, fairly quick. It was doing about 130 down here. The GT-R hasn't got the best straight line speed, that's probably my only complaint with it. It is extremely cheap though, it's only 110,000 credits, so definitely a very cheap car. However, it's cheaper still, well, actually it's the same price, sorry. The Dodge Viper ACR is next. Now, this I knew was a fantastic handling car, and I'm a bit annoyed about this lap. I know this car could go quicker. The problem is I drove the GT-R before this. This handles completely differently to the GT-R. This is, I said the Ferrari 360 Challenge was the best handling car. This is extremely close. This is an absolutely fantastic handling car. I didn't quite believe how good this thing is until I got in it. I've been told quite a bit that this is a really nice to drive car, but I just was blown away when I got in. The brakes on this are so utterly fantastic. And you wouldn't guess it because it's a Dodge Viper. The straight line speed is a bit of an issue in this one. It's got huge downforce. It can only do about 180 in a straight line, but through the corners it's absolutely planted. I could almost keep it flat out through the follow through. I know this car could go quicker than I threw it round. The problem I had is the different sorts of supercars I was driving today. This was definitely the best driving of them, and I don't know, I was sort of more scared of this car than I should be. Anyone could drive that car, absolutely fantastic, and it's only 110,000 credits. I do seriously recommend getting that. We move on to my least favourite car of the day. This is the Audi R8 V10 Plus. This has 592 horsepower and a 4-wheel drive system, and this was atrocious to drive. It really was not good. I've heard the R8's actually fairly decent, so it might just be the Plus model that's a bit strange. This basically handled like the 458 with 4-wheel drive. It had the same amount of tail happiness, it had a bit more understeer probably. The understeer, to be fair, on this wasn't as pronounced as it was on the GT-R, but that's because the GT-R wasn't wiggling around as much as this was. So this really was not a nice car to drive around here. I'm not a huge fan of the R8 to begin with anyway. I've always thought it's a bit boring for a supercar, and supercars aren't meant to be boring, so I wouldn't buy one, but it is a fantastic sounding car, I will give it that, but it's not the best. This is also 150,000 credits, I believe. The McLaren, I should have really done my research and checked. I believe the McLaren sits at 170,000 credits, maybe, or 240,000, I'm not quite sure. I'll probably annotate it. But yeah, the RDR8 is definitely not a good car. Now we move on to the Lamborghini Aventador. This is another real-life McLaren rival. I had very high hopes for this one. The Aventador, when I've driven it in previous Forzas, it's always seemed a bit understeering, and I drove it in Gran Turismo 6 and it was really horribly understeering. In this game, it's pretty much spot on. It's a really nice car to drive with this. It is slightly more expensive than the McLaren. I believe this comes in at about 400,000 credits. But it really is a very, very nice car to drive. I've driven an S-Class version of this, a modified one, and that's absolutely superb to drive. And the stock version, funnily enough, is also absolutely superb. And unlike the other cars you've seen today as well, this one's got a whole heap of straight line speed. This has got 691 horsepower. And because of the four-wheel drive system, it can stick it down really well. Understeer's a little bit of an issue, as you can see through there, but this car's planted. It really was quick around here, this car. In reality, the Aventador is slightly slower than the McLaren MP4 round the real Top Gear test track, but round here, it was definitely a quick car. Now we move on to two oddballs, and the first is the rough, let me try and get this right, RT12S, I believe. Yeah, this was, I was just looking through the cars. I was actually going to drive a Ferrari 599 GTO, and then this sort of caught my eye, and I thought, yeah, let's give this a go. I can't quite remember the exact figures for this off the top of my head, but I can tell you what it's like to drive, because I remember this very well. It's scary. It's basically Porsche. The car is based off the Porsche 911. They balance the car and tweak it, so they've had 50 years to tweak and balance, so now they've got the handling pretty much spot on in the new 911s. This has basically gone, let's just dump a whole lot of power in the back and not fix anything else about the car. The suspension is very wallowy on this car. I believe it actually picks up past 140 miles an hour. And all the weight's in the rear as well. So the weight distribution's wonky, so as a result the front can lift up. It's very tail happy, this car. It's scary to drive. It's really good fun, but it's absolutely terrifying to drive this car. If you're a beginner, I definitely would not recommend the rough, but it was quick in a straight line. Very, very quick. Now we move on to our final car, the McLaren F1. Now I wanted to give this a go. The MP4-12C and the F1 are actually pretty much equal PI. I believe the F1's 1 PI lower. The trade-off for that is the F1 has a whole lot more straight line speed. This was the fastest car in the world for, was it 11 years, I believe? And yeah, it sort of mixes the straight line speed, but of course the McLaren probably is the better handling of the two. Or the MP4, sorry, is probably the better handling of the two. The F1 though was actually really nice around here. My biggest complaint with this car was it's really, really expensive, as in, if it gets up into 1 million credits, this car really is really expensive. The other problem I have is the gear ratios are very long. That's because, of course, this was the fastest car in the world. It's got a specially made gearbox for it. You know, obviously to get to the higher speed, it has all its speed sort of stretched out. And they're stretched out a bit too much for this track and for my liking personally, but I had no complaints with the F1. I drove an upgraded version of this and it was really twitchy, but the standard version is actually really nice to drive. Yeah, I enjoyed it around here. It really was quite good fun, the F1. Anyway, coming on to the times, I've cut out the board just so you can see where all these cars were, because they were all within 10 of each other. The Lamborghini Aventador goes into 6th with a 1 minute 16.257. That's a ludicrously quick lap time from the Lamborghini. That's almost 1 second faster than the MP4. That's very, extremely, awesomely quick. I quite like the Aventador as well, so I'm happy with that. The F1 goes, yeah. That was extremely close. I'm not joking as well. I've got photography proof that that really did happen. It was really close between the F1 and the MP4. I was quite shocked when I saw that. The Viper ACR just misses out on the McLaren, although I am of the firm belief if If I had 1 or 2 more laps with the Viper, that would have beat the MP4. The Viper really is a good car, which you seriously have to go and try out now. Not exactly now. Watch the end of the video. The roof goes in 117.792. I was surprised with the roof. It was posting 119s, but on that final lap, it really did come together. That car, I drove it pretty much spot on. The GTR goes in with a 118.113. Just lacking on power a bit, and the understeer was a bit heavy in this car, I've got to say, but the GTR definitely is not a bad choice. And rather disappointingly, the Audi R8 V10 Plus, a 119.318. It's quicker than a Ferrari 360 and a Ferrari 458, so over them two, yeah, go with the R8, but yeah, I would have definitely taken the McLaren over the Audi, and probably the roof as well. As much as I do quite like the roof, it's not the best handling car in the world. Anyway, that's it for today, friends. I want to thank you very much for watching. Next week we'll be on Forza Motorsport 4, posting sometimes with some cars on there, because there's a better variety of cars on there, so we can throw some interesting ones around there. Anyway, until next time, farewell.